Today, I'm bringing back an old Great League legend to see if I can still get wins with it in Season 21 of Go Battle League. The Pokemon I'm going to be using today is Shiftry. Now, Shiftry was one of the most influential meta Pokemon in the first few seasons of Go Battle League nearly 5 full years ago. Caleb Peng released a Skarmory Shiftry Meganium line that took the Great League by storm. But over the years, many meta changes and power creep has made it so you never see Shiftry anymore. However, today I'm looking to change that. Now you may be asking, why Shiftry? Well, Shiftry does have a very cool offensive typing. Grass and Dark combined can hit a lot of the meta for at least neutral damage. And on top of that, in the current meta, Galarian Corsola is often paired with water types, and Shiftry can be a bit of a niche core breaker to that role. However, there's a reason why we haven't seen Shiftry in quite some time. Back when Shiftry was meta, the main fire type was Alolan Marowak, which Shiftry could fight back against with super effective damage. Now it's Talonflame, and Shiftry is just going to get fully incinerated down. Add to that Shadow Drapion being on nearly every team, and we're going to have our work cut out for us when it comes to team building. So when it comes to team building, I'm going to need to have a core pairing with Shiftry that does a great job at beating Shadow Drapion while also handling the flyers and simultaneously not being weak to fighting. This limits my options drastically. Enter the star of the show and the hero that Shiftry needs, and that is Unova Stunfisk. Unova Stunfisk is a ground and electric type Pokemon with the moveset of Thundershock, Mud Bomb, and Discharge. Not only does it have a positive matchup against Drapion, due to its electric typing, it's going to do great against the flyers that Shiftry doesn't want to see, and it does not have a weakness to fighting. To round out the team, I'm going to use Shadow Feraligatr as the safe switch. This still leaves the team incredibly weak to both Toxapex and Drapion leads, and a bit soft to Annihilape as a whole, but considering we're team building around Shiftry, I think that's the best we're going to be able to do. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and we're off to a very tough start in game number 1, leading Shiftry into Annihilape. Now this team does not have a counter resist, meaning that Annihilape is going to be a pretty big problem. Feraligatr is able to win the 0 and the 1 shield, but if Annihilape wants, they can double shield and after throwing 1 Rage Fist, fully farm down. I'm going to fire off the Hydro Cannon just about as late as I can throw it, and to my surprise, the Annihilape lets it go. Winning switch advantage is very important, especially when Shadow Drapion hits the field of play, as now I can bring out Unova Stunfisk, but I'm very much hoping. So far, my opponent has been double strong to the Shiftry. I have to hope that Shiftry has some play in the back. Mud Bomb will hit for super effective damage here, but it is not enough to KO Shadow Drapion. Drapion is able to hang on, firing off another Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail will connect, and I will go for the Mud Bomb just to guarantee the knockout or their final shield. They're going to let it through. In the back, it's going to be Shadow Walrein, and that's another Pokemon that was an absolute titan in metas past. Walrein is at 8 Powder Snows here, which means they're still 2 short of the double Icicle Spear, and that allows Shiftry to get the double Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade number 1 is going to be shielded. It's going to be a charge attack priority tie. Shiftry with the significantly higher attack KOs the Shadow Walrein, and we're able to take the win. Hopping into game number 2, Shiftry versus Azumarill, a significantly better lead this time. Now Shiftry, of course, Snarl is hitting for resisted damage, but Leaf Blade should be pretty close to 2-shotting in this matchup. Leaf Blade is devastating damage to the Azumarill. Opponent is going to return fire with an Ice Beam, and Shiftry is so frail that I'm going to need to shield. Shiftry gonna farm up a ton of energy, and here I make a critical error. I have back-to-back Leaf Blades. I should not play to the CMP tie because now I can't throw my second Leaf Blade without giving up my second shield first. So that's a pretty big mental error on my part in this game, and that's going to make it a lot more difficult for me. My opponent will never shield here. They know that I have the back-to-back. I go for a slight undercharge, but it does still KO. The fact that they stayed in, they're probably ABA weak to the Shiftry. When they bring in Annihilape, I'm going to fire off the Leaf Blade, and then whether they shield or not, I'm pivoting out into Feraligatr. They're going to let it go. In comes Feraligatr. I'll get the Hydro Cannon before they make the close combat, and now if they want this energy, they're going to have to give the final shield back. And considering they stayed in, I'm expecting the move that I have banked on Shiftry should serve me pretty well in the endgame. Close combat is going to connect, 1-hit KO onto Feraligatr. I wait the switch clock, bring in Stunfisk, and in the back is going to be Galarian Corsola, and this game will be a win. Throwing this discharge burns my switch timer. They're one off a move, but I'm one off a move as well, and Shiftry is going to win that CMP tie. Foul play, monster damage onto the Corsola. Corsola's stuck throwing its energy, and that instantly ends the game. They're going to go for an undercharge on the Nightshade, but Shiftry gets to farm down, leave with the Leaf Blade, and Shiftry gets the KO, one of its best counters in Annihilate, and we're able to take the win. Moving to the next match, we pick up a Nightmare lead Shiftry into Talonflame. I'm going to throw one Snarl and defer the Incinerate onto Feraligatr. Opponent is going to quick switch out into Superior. I'm farming up to the Ice Beam, baiting with the Hydro Cannon, as this will be able to grab the shield, but my opponent reads me like a book. That is a stone cold no shield from my opponent, and that puts me in an incredibly poor position. I bring in the Shiftry, but I'm getting outpaced. Aerial Ace is going to hit for super effective damage, and Superior is another extreme problem Pokemon for this team. Team building around Shiftry, turns out it's extremely difficult to do. In comes the Talonflame, I defer the Incinerate onto Stunfisk. They're staying in to throw energy, and this means hopefully they're weak in the back. They go for the Brave Bird, it's more Pekko in the back, and Shiftry unfortunately was pretty useless in this match, but it looks like Stunfisk will be able to core break in the endgame. I am going to be committing the shield on the Psychic Fangs. Psychic Fangs does not knock out there, but I'm just trying to preserve health on the Stunfisk because I know I'm going to have to take Incinerates from the Talonflame later in the match. Mud Bomb is going to be shielded, and then I get a catch of a Psychic Fangs onto Shiftry. Shiftry is going to try and look for a farm down here. There's the switch into the Talonflame, and they snipe me down. I don't get my energy, and now I need to get to back-to-back moves with the Stunfisk. Now, if my opponent had thrown a fly earlier, they would be one away from a fly. They would have it right here and they would win the game. However, my opponent did actually end up throwing a Brave Bird earlier, meaning they would get outpaced. They're forced to rely on more Pekko, and it just doesn't have enough health, so we're able to take the win. Azumarill in the lead, always something that Shiftry is going to be happy to see, as long as shields are up, as Shiftry is going to have very fast pacing, and Snarl is really never a move that Shiftry is counting on to do any meaningful damage. Shiftry is going to be shielding up as Azumarill goes for the Ice Beam. Shiftry going to farm up, and now I wait the turn, so this time I'm playing better than I did in that first Azumarill matchup, because that's how I should play it. I shouldn't play to a CMP tie. Opponent sends in Bibarel, and what are they doing? How is this their best response to an up energy Shiftry? They will commit the shield. Shiftry is going to cap tie them here, and this Leaf Blade is going to be devastating. They let it go. They nearly get one hit KO'd. And what could they possibly have in the back? I decide to let it go. Aggressive switch to Feraligatr. It's Gastrodon in the back, and that's the kind of team I was trying to target with Shiftry, as I was seeing teams that were just completely disrespecting it as a Pokemon. Terrible lead in the next match, leading into Talonflame. I save switch for Alligator, and out comes more Pekko. Talonflame, more Pekko Core, a pretty common one on leaderboards. I'm able to grab a shield with the Hydro Cannon. My opponent is, of course, going to play to the CMP tie and deny my energy with Feraligatr. If I shield there, they just shield back and Thundershock me all the way down. That really didn't feel worth it. So I'm basically playing to the win con, where Unova Stunfisk core breaks them endgame. Shiftry is going to make the Leaf Blade. That's going to be good night. Two more Pekko. In comes the Stunfisk, and oh no, it's Diggersby in the back. Diggersby is a Pokemon that is technically weak to Leaf Blade, but this is another Pokemon that is honestly one of the reasons why you don't see Shiftry anymore. And Shiftry is a grass type that does actually lose to Diggersby. In this instance here, I mean, unfortunately, these Mud Bombs are just doing less than nothing. Thundershocks are double resisted. I'm going to try and play it out. Honestly, more out of spite than anything, because I really want to win with Shiftry. But my goodness, Shiftry has proven to be an extremely difficult Pokemon to win with. And now my opponent has a very safe win condition to avoid the catch, and that's just keep farming. I even go one pass to try and anticipate the catch, but unfortunately, I'm not able to predict when they're going to throw. They just get to knock out with the fly. Stunfisk has no way of beating Diggersby, so I will concede the match. Shiftry, Shadow for Alligator, that's more like it, a better lead. Opponent safe switches into Malamar, and for Malamar, I don't have a clear response. Shiftry does not do great here because they can take a Leaf Blade pretty comfortably, so I'm just going to go for a Leaf Blade, and I'm going to bring in the Stunfisk. The thought process here is that Stunfisk, more than happy to tank any one move from the Malamar, and I can overfarm to exit with energy that will be threatening to Feraligatr if they decide to bring it back in. They go for the superpower. I can now overfarm massively with the Stunfisk, and this Mud Bomb will easily KO the debuff Malamar. Malamar is going to get KO'd. In comes Feraligatr. Feraligatr is going to be hit with super effective damage if they let it through. Discharge lands. I have a Mud Bomb as well due to the perfect overfarm we did versus the Malamar. Mud Bomb is going to be shielded, and now I have a choice to make. I decide to bring in the Shiftry. There's a little pause, but I do get my fast move through, thankfully. They are going to go for a Hydro Cannon. And now in the back, they have Corviknight, and this is just a completely one game. Alignment extremely favorable for me now that I was able to get the Malamar out of the way. As Feraligatr just has a winning matchup versus the Corviknight, and I was able to bank a Leaf Blade on the Shiftry, and that has Feraligatr's name written all over it. Hydro Cannon number 1 is going to be no shielded, but there's another one right after. This is going to command the final shield from the opponent. They get the sand attack down, but I banked a move from earlier. Now this is double resisted, but the Corviknight is so low that a double resisted Leaf Blade will KO. In comes Feraligatr, and the opponent will resign the match. Shiftry into Talonflame. We've seen Talonflame lead quite a bit. Terrible lead. Safe switch into Feraligatr, and the opponent is staying in with the Talonflame. That's amazing news for me. I get to fire off the Hydro Cannon, grab the shield. They undertap the Fly, which means I do get a free Shadow Claw. So they clearly have no response to a Feraligatr with energy, and they confirm that fact by bringing in their own Feraligatr. I'm expecting it could very well be Morpeko third, although if it was Morpeko third, I feel like they should have brought it into the Feraligatr. So I'm hoping it's Morpeko, but I'm not holding my breath. So now I get to bring in the Shiftry. Shiftry, going to farm up as much as possible, but unfortunately I did actually get one turn bring in there, which did mean that I wasn't quite able to cap tie. I'm going to bake a ton of energy, bring in the Stunfisk, but in the back, it's a Gastrodon, and that's just, I just don't have play here. So I will concede the match. Shiftry versus Shadow Steelix. Shadow Steelix now runs Thunderfang, so this is a matchup where Shiftry should have an advantage. However, if they get a Breaking Swipe debuff, I imagine that could probably flip this matchup pretty effortlessly for the Steelix. And Shiftry is entirely reliant on its typing to do basically anything. If you ask it to try and win neutrally, that's not going to be something it's going to be able to do. So Leaf Blade is going to connect, getting them low. I didn't want to risk them living a Snarl, so I snipe with the Feraligatr because Feraligatr energy is always strong. In comes Wigglytuff, and Wigglytuff is going to be met with a Hydro Cannon. I'm really hoping my opponent no shields here. And they do no shield. That is absolutely terrific for me because my goal, honestly, is I just need to get this into Mud Bomb range. If it's in Mud Bomb range, then it's very fine for Stunfisk to deal with. So I will wait down the switch clock into the last possible second. In comes Stunfisk. They have Feraligatr in the back, and since I'm ahead by a turn because their switch takes one turn, I can just go straight discharge and win the match. Opponent realizes their only win con is to call a bait, which they do, and we're going to take that game. Shiftry versus Shadow Drapion. This is an absolute nightmare lead. I'm going to safe switch Feraligatr, and Feraligatr is going to be immediately met with a crunch. I'm desynced by a turn due to the switch in, so I can't win the matchup. I just let it go, and my opponent is now going to bring in their own Feraligatr. Feraligatr is going to be smacked with a Hydro Cannon. They're going to get a full farm down, and now suddenly I'm very much regretting the fact that I did not throw one Snarl before switching out, because now I get outpaced. I have to respect the Ice Beam as it would KO. They end up going for Hydro Cannon in this matchup, and they go for another Hydro Cannon, so maybe they're on Crunch actually, because they just never ended up throwing the Ice Beam after all. I try and get energy on the Stunfisk, and this is the core that Stunfisk breaks, but I'm down a shield, and being down a shield is a death sentence in this endgame. 2 discharges plus the Thunder Shocks do not even knock out, and I'm forced to give up my final shield. My hope is that I'm able to successfully bait. That's basically my only way back in this game, but my opponent doesn't have to shield a discharge here, so they are actually just going to let that go. I panic throw a Mud Bomb. I'm hoping surely this will knock out. It still doesn't KO, and I'm forced to go for the CMP sack swap onto the Shiftry. So I fire off the Leaf Blade, but they can just no shield and win the game with Shadow Drapion. And Drapion will not even have to be hit with a second Leaf Blade, as they're going to get a Poison Sting down. What an absolute disaster of a game, and my opponent gets a 2-shield flex. Next match, it's not getting much better. Leading Shiftry into Mandibuzz. I really want to make this Shiftry work, but my goodness, it feels like in a lot of games, Shiftry is feeling like dead weight, and the backline is really having to sweep. The Mandibuzz stays into the Feraligatr safe switch. They call a Hydro Cannon bait, but even so, landing the Hydro Cannon is still very valuable damage. They're going to Dark Pulse and send in a Shadow Scizor. Look at the spice from the opponent. And I have to hope against hope that they are running the usual moveset of Night/Trailblaze, because X-Scissor would be absolutely devastating for Shiftry. My goal is to try and get all shields down. If I can get all shields down, then maybe Stunfisk can sweep in the endgame. Scizor is going to fire their energy instantly, not playing to the CMP tie. If they did play to the CMP tie, I was considering catching back onto the Shiftry, and now I just have to hope. I have to hope that they do not have X-Scissor. Come on, it's just a Night Slash. That still does almost all of my health, because Shiftry is a wet paper plate of a Pokemon. I send in the Stunfisk. In the back is Shadow Fortress, and I am very fortunate that my opponent is running a spicy team. If they had a more meta backline, then I would be in some pretty serious trouble. But I believe that I can sweep this endgame with Stunfisk. Shadow Earthquake is massive damage, but the triple resisted Volt Switches just can do nothing to the Stunfisk. So even though I'm low, I'm in no danger of getting farmed down. I'm actually able to farm them down, and as they bring in the Mandibuzz, now I'm just in a strictly winning position. Discharge gets them low, one Thunder Shock, and the combo play with the 2 moves that we have stored on the Shiftry. It turns out we only needed the one, as the Leaf Blade does KO the Mandibuzz, and we're able to escape with a win. Hopping into the final match, and we get the best possible lead we could ask for, leading into a Quagsire. They save switch Clodsire, and I was honestly extremely slow on this counter swap, because this team is ABA weak to Clodsire. Well, the Unova Stunfisk does technically have a winning matchup against Clodsire in perfectly even energy, but if the Clodsire has an energy advantage, then you can't feel comfortable switching in the Stunfisk, as Stunfisk's advantage is all due to pacing, and that's completely nullified by a Clodsire being safe switched. So I will double shield on Sludge Bombs, barely get the Shadow Claw farm down, because I know that Hydro Cannon is incredibly threatening to Quagsire. Basically, every Quagsire team gets immediately folded by a Feraligatr with energy, so they're forced to bring back in the Quagsire. Hydro Cannon lands, devastating the Quagsire, and they're forced to throw energy. Otherwise, I was only 1 away from my next Hydro. I'm going to bring in Shiftry, and they're staying in. Is this another one of those double water teams? I fire off the Leaf Blade, they're going to shield, and they get outpaced. I was slow on the switch into Feraligatr earlier, but that meant I had residual energy on the Shiftry. I outpace. It's going to be Mandibuzz in the back. I can send in Stunfisk, and the opponent will resign the match. So, all in all, now that the games are done, how did the team perform? I started in low 3100s, and my first set I went 2-3. And then I proceeded to go 3-2, 3-2. So overall, we did go ever so slightly positive across the 3 sets using Shiftry. However, what I'll say is that was in large part due to the fact that we had some very good Pokemon in the back. Shadow Feraligatr, obviously, it's one of the best Great League Pokemon for a reason, and Stunfisk proved to be a valuable core breaker in helping to fix many of Shiftry's coverage deficiencies. So, Shiftry, not a Pokemon that I would recommend running, so I don't recommend using this team, as it does have a lot of weaknesses. Being that ABA weak to a Shadow Drapion is not something that I would recommend, but overall, I would call this experiment a success, as even going slightly positive on the leaderboards with something as fun as Shiftry, I see as an absolute success. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, please do leave a like on the video, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't, and hey, turn on those notifications as well, so that way you'll never miss an upload. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.